the Reverend Cassandra Hartley to our pulpit, and Doris Williams as our guest musician today. If you are a visitor and are online and would like Northwest to stay in touch with you, please fill out the visitor form that will appear in the chat box. If you are here in person, you can fill out the visitor sign-in form in the atrium. Please greet your neighbors with a wave from wherever you are. Okay, no online people? There was a problem with our link this morning, so we hope that people find their way to us. We have a few announcements to share with you. More information about Northwest and its events is in the weekly newsletter and on our website, hopefully with the appropriate links. Our next joint service of First UU Detroit and Northwest will take place on April 21st here at Northwest. Reverend Julie and Eva will be leading a dirt communion. So please bring a little bit of dirt, or I would say earth or soil, from wherever you call home. I don't think dust bunnies are part of that. Young adults from generations X, Y, and Z are invited to join other Detroit area UUs for a trivia night at Ferndale Project on Monday, April 15th. Trivia rounds start at 7 and 8, so come join us for either or both games. Text your RSVP or with your questions to Marley Seacrest, and I am sure that that is in the newsletter that went out this week. There will be an Earth Day cleanup on Saturday, April 20th from 10 to 2 p.m. in Eliza Howell Park. You can contact Eva Leventer for more details. Now I would like to invite Linda Gobeski and Justice Wienheis to join us at the front, please. Here, this front. So Linda, Justin, and Rick Goldberg, who couldn't be here today, are your newly formed transition team. I'm going to have you step over here. Okay. And if these are the folks to talk to, if you have any questions or ideas about the shared ministry with First UU Detroit. And I'd like to thank the three of them for being willing to serve in such an important and we hope exciting role. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Before our prelude, let's all take a deep breath and settle into a time of worship. Thank you. We light our chalice, the symbol of our faith, knowing this morning that many other Unitarian Universalist congregations across this land and around the world are doing the same. We light our flame with words from our mission statement. Please repeat after me. We light this flame to grow in spirit, knowledge, and action. Accept and challenge one another to support each other in times of joy and need.
Good morning. Each week, we offer a land acknowledgement. We honor and pay our respects to the land on which we live and work, which was violently stolen through colonialism, genocide, and forced removal of its traditional stewards. These stewards are the Anishinaabeg, the Council of the Three Fires, which include the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi, also known as the Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi tribes. We also acknowledge the people of African descent who were forcibly removed from their land and separated from their families through kidnapping and enslavement, and pay reverence and respect to them for building this country's infrastructure and economy with no compensation or reparations to date. Let us begin our time together also with a hymn. Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in hymn number 1000, which is in the teal hymnal, Morning Has Come.
Your order of service shows a story for all ages, but the children aren't in here, so you'll have to wait for another time to learn about the pout-pout fish. Well, we don't have the story. I'll do a you know what, Jojo? It has a happy ending for the pout-pout fish. And I can tell you that he turns his pout upside down. Is that helpful? Well, all the children but Jojo are in Children's Chapel, so we're glad Jojo's here with us. Each week, Northwest shares its plate collection with a community partner. This month, that partner is Michigan Liberation, a statewide network of people and organizations organizing to end the criminalization of Black families and communities of color in Michigan. It envisions a state without mass incarceration, mass policing, and punishment, with the best public education in the nation, single-payer healthcare, and thriving Black and brown communities. All undesignated donations will be split between Michigan Liberation and our congregation. You can give in a variety of ways. If there are any people online, you can see how to do that online. And for those here in person, we will pass a collection basket for checks and cash.
Today I want to share a reading, which is a wisdom tale called A Messiah Among Us. It's told in many different traditions and in many different ways, but this one focuses on a monastery that had fallen on hard times. It was once part of a great order, which, as a result of religious persecution, had lost all of its branches. It was decimated to the extent that there were only 5 monks left in the mother house, the abbot and 4 others, all of whom were over 70. Clearly, it was a dying order. Deep in the woods surrounding the monastery was a little hut that the rabbi from a nearby town occasionally used for hermitage. One day, it occurred to the abbot to visit the hermitage to see if the rabbi could offer any advice that might save the monastery. The rabbi welcomed the abbot and commiserated. "I know how it is," he said. "The spirit has gone out of the people. Almost no one comes to the synagogue anymore either." So the old rabbi and the old abbot wept together and spoke of deep things. The time came when the abbot had to leave, and they embraced. "It's been wonderful being with you," said the abbot, "but I've failed in my purpose for coming. Have you no piece of advice that might save the monastery?" "No, I'm sorry," the rabbi responded. "I have no advice to give. The only thing I can tell you is that the Messiah is one of you." When the other monks heard the rabbi's words, they wondered what possible significance that might have. "The Messiah is one of us? One of us here at the monastery? Do you suppose he means the abbot? Of course, it must be the abbot, who has been our leader for so long. On the other hand, he might mean Brother Thomas, who is undoubtedly also a holy man. Certainly, he didn't mean Brother Elrod. He's so crotchety. But then again, Brother Elrod is also wise. Surely he couldn't have meant Brother Philip. He's too passive. But then, magically, he's always there when you need him. Of course, he didn't mean me. But what if he did? Oh, Lord, not me. I couldn't mean that much, could I? As they contemplated again and again in this manner, the old monks began to treat each other with extraordinary respect, on the off chance that one of them might be the Messiah. And on the off chance that each monk himself might be the Messiah, they began to treat themselves with extraordinary respect. Because the forest in which the monastery was situated was beautiful, people occasionally came to visit, to picnic or wander along the old paths, most of which led to a dilapidated chapel. They sensed the aura of extraordinary respect that surrounded the 5 old monks, permeating the atmosphere. So they began to come more frequently, bringing friends, and their friends brought friends. And some of the younger men who came to visit began to engage in conversations with the monks. After a while, 1 or 2 asked if they could join, and then another and another. Within a few years, the monastery became once again a thriving order, and thanks to the rabbi's gift, a vibrant community of light and love. In that spirit, I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing hymn number 1009 in the Teal hymnal, Meditation on Breathing. When I woke up on the first morning in our new house, I made my way through the maze of boxes to the kitchen so I could make coffee. Because of course, like any good Unitarian Universalist, I made sure the coffee maker was the first thing we unpacked. While it was brewing, I went out to the covered front porch to take in the new view. What I saw was an expanse of green and gold fields dotted with old red barns and ancient trees, all washed in the pink light of sunrise. I exhaled loudly as if I had been holding my breath for a long time, and then I breathed in all that spaciousness and light. A few days later, I was in the midst of unpacking when my daughter came in and put her arms around me. "I love this house," she said contentedly, "even better than the last house." I pulled her in tight, and this time we both exhaled together. To understand the significance of this moment, I have to back up just a bit. You see, years before, my family had to leave a house that we had poured our heart and soul and a lot of literal sweat and tears into, because my then husband's job was transferred across the country. Of course, the next 3 years, we moved 3 times with 3 small children. When we finally settled into our third house, thankfully back in Michigan, I thought I had regained stability finally for the kids and gotten my dream farm to boot. But a year later, we came to the difficult decision to divorce. And we both wanted to give the kids stability, so we agreed to continue co-owning the house so the kids and I could keep living in it. For the next year, I worked to maintain the house and 10 acres of land while also working, single parenting, taking care of a menagerie of animals, and processing all that comes with divorce and transition. For some strange reason, I felt a little overwhelmed. But I told myself again and again that I had to do this because moving would devastate the kids, and I couldn't give up the farm I had worked so hard for and wanted for so long. The have-tos and the shoulds and the musts kept piling and piling up until I felt like I was locked in an internal battle with no winner. Finally, one day I cracked and called a realtor. I felt like a failure, but it was time to sell. As I feared, the kids were initially heartbroken by the news, and of course the selling and buying process was riddled with nonstop stress. And yet, for all the fears that came true, there were also some unexpected gifts. In the end, we found a good home in a safe place, which I don't take for granted in a world where unjust systems keep many people from accessing even basic shelter. We had half the space and land that we had before, and all the hard work and challenges that come with living in a house that's over 150 years old. But what I realized in that moment, holding my daughter close, is that it was the perfect house for us. Not because of the land, although that was beautiful, but because of what it had come to represent to our family. At first, the story we told ourselves and others is that our previous home was the dream farm, and leaving it would be awful. So when it came time to sell, everything was tinged with grief. But then, slowly, we began to tell a different story. A story about getting a fresh start in a new and exciting place. By the time we got to actually loading up the moving van, we stood in the empty rooms of our old house and can barely remember why it had meant so much to us. This chapter in my life, and in fact all the challenging chapters in my life, have slowly helped me to understand that I can cultivate more resilience and joy if I stop reacting to what's happening and ask myself some critical questions. The first question is, what are the stories I'm telling myself about what's happening? And the second question is, are the stories I'm telling myself both true and helpful? I ask myself the first question because as human beings, we are natural meaning makers and pattern finders and storytellers. So for example, if I'm in a meeting and I notice that one of my coworkers is grimacing while I'm speaking, I will likely instantaneously tell myself a story about what's happening. So I could tell myself, my coworker thinks, I don't know what I'm talking about. I never should have spoken up about this. And that story would lead to anxiety. Or maybe I'm holding on to anger about an argument I had with them. So I might make up a story like, my coworker is going to challenge what I'm saying because they're always picking a fight. And this story would lead to more anger. Or I might know that my coworker's mother died recently, so the story I might tell myself is, my coworker is struggling with so much grief, I can see the pain on their face. And this story would lead to more compassion. Any of these stories could be true, or none of them could be true, but the one I choose has an enormous impact on my feelings and behaviors. Once we recognize that our thoughts and feelings are often generated by the stories we're telling, we can begin to notice which ones keep coming up for us. Sometimes these stories are empowering or motivating, but sometimes they're incredibly destructive. The most common destructive stories we tell ourselves are some variation of, I don't belong, I'm not worthy of love. As the Buddhist teacher and writer Tara Brach puts it, the compelling personal stories that really create suffering are driven by survival fears, shaped by the standards of our culture and the values of our culture, and then delivered through our parents. Then they interact with our personal biography and experiences to get hardened in place. They tell us what's wrong or what's going to go wrong, what to expect, how to find safety. This is why we have to ask the question, are the stories I'm telling myself actually true? Sometimes in the example of the coworker, there are easy ways to find that answer. We could just ask our coworker afterward. We could tell them what stories we were making up and see which ones are actually valid or if something entirely different is going on. Other times though, especially in more complex and painful circumstances, finding out what's true gets harder. As the researcher and author Brene Brown puts it, when hard things happen to us, we are neurobiologically hardwired to make sense of it. And we want to make sense of our hurt as fast as we can. If we can come up with a story that makes sense of it, our brain actually chemically rewards us for that story, whether it's true or not. Overcoming that need to quickly find and hold on to what feels like it's truth is not easy, especially when we've been conditioned to return to sometimes damaging stories of our childhoods. But this is where our support systems can help. If we have at least one or two other people we can trust, we can use them as thought partners to reflect on the validity of our stories. We also need to build in the time and the ability to do deeper reflection, which is why developing spiritual practices is so essential. Nearly all spiritual practices are, at their heart, about practicing the ability to pause and pay attention. Whether we do meditation or prayer or yoga or knitting or walking in the woods, any of them can pull us out of our day-to-day lives and allow us to reconnect to something deeper and truer within ourselves and the world around us. Our support systems and our spiritual practices also help us reflect on the final part of the question. Are the stories I'm telling myself both true and helpful? And this is a critical distinction because in complex situations, many things can be true. It was true for me that selling my house meant pain for the kids and giving up what I thought was a dream. It was true that selling also meant a chance for a fresh start and the excitement of a new house. Both of them were true, but only one of them was helpful to focus on. Now, don't get me wrong, it's important to recognize our pain and allow ourselves to grieve. And we can't always simply choose the most positive story to focus on. Not only is that not always realistic, but for many people, especially those who've experienced trauma or who have marginalized identities, it could actually be dangerous. When someone's facing systemic oppression, the stories they choose can have life or death consequences. What I am saying, though, is that we often have more agency to shape our reality than we realize. What's happening in our lives is almost never as important as the stories we tell ourselves about what's happening in our lives. For me, this is a source of enormous hope. It means that we can be more resilient and more empowered in the face of day-to-day challenges and challenging chapters. Like the brothers in the monastery in our story, sometimes just changing what we tell ourselves changes everything. To give you a taste of what I mean, I'd like to invite you to join me in a meditation created by Tara Brach as part of a talk she gave entitled Stories That Imprison Our Heart. And I know guided meditations don't work for everyone, so if that's the case for you, you can use this time in whatever way works best for you. But for those who do appreciate guided meditation or who are willing to give it a try, feel free to make yourselves comfortable and kind of get settled in your seat however works best for you. Sometimes putting your feet flat on the ground can help. You can close your eyes or soften your gaze. Take a few deep breaths to kind of help settle in. Now, I invite you to scan your life and choose a situation where you repeatedly feel reactive or get stuck in a difficult emotion like anger or hurt or fear. It could be a situation with a partner, your family, your work, an addictive behavior, whatever feels challenging for you. And don't choose something that feels too overwhelming or traumatic, something that's a little more manageable in this space. Once you have the situation in mind, you can ask yourself, when I get caught in this situation, what story am I living into? Am I believing I'm a victim, or that I'm unworthy, that I'm unlovable, that I'm not seen or respected? Just notice whatever comes up for you. And as you think about what comes up for you, notice how it feels, what emotions come up, and how those emotions feel in your body. Maybe it's tenseness, gripping, feeling in your stomach or your chest. Just notice what comes up for you. Now see if you can sense the vulnerability underneath your story or stories. The softness, because underneath our stories, our identities are locked in a small and separate self. See if you can touch into that self, that part of you that feels wounded or stuck or hurt. And think about what ways of offering care might be most healing and comfortable to that self. Is there a message that the wise part of you can offer to it now? You might even imagine it as a being or a presence that you can offer comfort to. If it helps, you can also gently place your hand on your heart or rub your arms, whatever can offer yourself that physical sense of connection. You can try saying to that vulnerable place or vulnerable self within, I'm here, I'm listening, I care, I'm sorry. You don't deserve to feel this pain. I love you. Feel yourself as a caring witness to that smaller, more separate self. Now see if you can imagine what your life would be like without this story that's trapping this self. What if you didn't buy into your story? Who would you be if you weren't living into it? Take another moment to imagine what that would feel like in your body, what emotions would come up as you imagine what it would be like to let go of that story. And now, slowly in your own time, no rush, you can begin to come back to this space again. You can begin to move or stretch. Take another deep breath. On your own time, you can open your eyes if they were closed. And as we come back, I want to share a quote from Tara Brach, who writes, "Our stories keep us bound in a small, separate self, but beyond our stories is a field of belonging that we can begin to taste and feel and intuit. This is the blessing. This is the hope." While I know that practice was short, hopefully it gave you at least a taste of what it's like to become aware of your stories, to offer yourself some loving witness and care, and to rest in the field of belonging that Brock talks about. I know I spend more time caught up in my stories than I do in my wise mind or my wise self. The pull to return to that small, separate self is so strong. But I try to remember that first morning in my new house, how I looked out at the window, through the window at the rolling farm field stretched out as far as I could see, and I felt so open, so light. And it wasn't because of the view, it was because of the space I had opened up within myself by letting go of a story that was no longer serving me. In this newfound space, I could finally exhale, stretch out, and begin to write something new. May this be true for all of us. May it be true as we begin to think about what stories we want to write and open up that space within ourselves. May it be so, and blessed be. For our closing hymn, please rise in body or in spirit and join together in singing hymn number 95 in the gray hymnal, "There is More Love Somewhere."
now that you've all settled into your seats, I'm going to ask you to rise in body and spirit and face each other for the close of the service. I invite you to make a reverent gesture, which may mean putting your hands on your heart, opening your arms to the universe, bowing your head, or if you and they are comfortable, reaching out to the person next to you. This is a moment in our worship where we take time to notice all who have gathered today in service to something larger than ourselves. We will now extinguish the chalice. Please repeat after me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope. The warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
As we go forth into the week ahead, let us remember that a new story is always possible. May we write one that brings more hope, more connection, and more love for ourselves and for a world that so desperately needs it. May it be so. Blessed be.